Okay, good morning, boys. Now let us continue with the next chapter. That is chapter number 9. That is exogenous process and its associated landforms. Now, if you look at this Earth, now Earth has two types of pressure. First one is the endogenetic, and the second one is the exogenetic. Now, endogenetic forces are the internal forces which results in the eruption of volcanoes, which results in the formation of earthquakes. Now, exogenous process are those processes which is found especially on the surface of the earth. Now, when these forces it is found, it acts on the surface of the earth, it results in the formation of various types of landforms. Now the endogenetic gives formation of different types of relief feature, but this exogenous process results in the formation of different types of landscapes, especially on the surface of the earth. Now, if you look at here, now exogenous process has been further explained. The first one is the gradation. Now, gradation means removal or unevenness of the land surface to make level land. It means that gradation means to remove the unevenness of the surface so that the land will come on the same level. That is called as a gradation. Now, this gradation comes into existence when a surface is graded only when erosional and depositional are almost equal. It means that the gradation comes into existence when the deposition and the erosion is almost equal. That means the erosion has to be the same, it has to erode the uneven surface. Clear? Those uneven surface has to be eroded and the low-lying areas has to be deposited so that the low-lying areas comes at a level of the other areas. So when these two processes, that is the erosion and the deposition, are almost equal, then the gradation comes into existence. Next, degradation. Now, degradation means general wearing away of the land surface by external forces known as denudation. It means that general wearing means erosion. General erosion of the land surface by external forces. Now, what are the external forces? The external forces are the running water, winds, the moving ice, or the glaciers. Now, these are the external forces. So, when these external forces, when it erodes the land, it is known as denudation. Now, this denudation is a word which has been extracted from a Latin word meaning denudare, meaning to lay bare. It consists, now see, this denudation consists of three factors. It consists of three factors, and those factors are the weathering, erosion, and the transportation. Now, these three factors results in the formation of denudation. Now, the first factor, weathering. Weathering means natural breaking down of rocks. It means that there is no human interference in breaking up of huge boulders of rocks. When a huge boulder of rocks, it breaks naturally, that is called as a weathering. After the weathering, the erosion comes into existence. Erosion means scraping as well as polishing as well as conversion of big boulders into smaller boulders when they collide among each other. In erosion and weathering, there is no movement. Of those sediments except the pull by the gravity of the earth. So, for example, let's say a big boulder is lying on a cliff. If it is lying on a cliff and if it falls down because of the gravity, that cannot be considered as a transportation. that cannot be considered as a transportation. That also does not come between weathering and erosion. So here in weathering and erosion, weathering means natural breaking down of rocks. Erosion means scraping, polishing and smaller rocks when they collide among each other and when they break itself. And when they break itself, that is called as a erosion. And the next is transportation. Now transportation means movement of the fine particles which is being converted into fine particles by erosion. When those fine particles is being formed due to erosion and the movement takes place, by the agent of transportation like the water and the wind. When the transportation takes place by these two agents, it results in transportation. Second one, aggregation. Aggregation is also known as deposition. It is also known as deposition. Sediments are those sediments which has been brought down by the transportation. The sediments which has been brought down by the transportation, sediments which are been brought down and deposited in those low-lying areas. And the height of these low-lying areas rises up due to continuous deposition. The low-lying areas rise up, that is called as aggregation. Now if you look at here, this aggregation, degradation and gradation. Clear? Now these three are interlinked. It means that they have a relation. One after the another. That is why I have wrote it down here. Interrelationship between degradation, aggregation and gradation. Clear? Now listen carefully. Carrying capacity of a river is more than its actual load in the mountains. Carrying capacity of a river is more than its actual load in the mountains. The reason is that in the mountains, the slopes are much more steeper. As the slopes are much more steeper, the velocity of the water increases. As the velocity of the water increases, its carrying capacity also increases and results in erosion. So erosion becomes one of the main function. And which leads to degradation. And the load of the river or the sediments of the river which is being brought down by the river results deposition. Load of the river is more than the carrying capacity near the sea. It means that the load of the sediment which has been brought down by the river is more than the carrying capacity near the sea. Why? Because near the sea means it is a flat land. So on the flat land, the river becomes sluggish. The velocity of the water becomes very, very slow. As the velocity of the water becomes very slow, its carrying capacity also decreases, especially near the sea, and which results in deposition. Because the carrying capacity is slow of the river near the sea, it results in deposition, which is known as aggregation. In the middle course of a river, erosion and deposition are almost equal, leading to gradation. In the middle course of the river. Now there are three courses of river: upper course, middle course and the lower course. Lower course means near the sea, where the river becomes completely sluggish, becomes completely slow. Middle course means in between the mountains and the plains. Where the slopes are much more gentle. When the slopes becomes much more gentle, its erosion and deposition are almost the same and results into gradation. And therefore, there is a relation between degradation, aggradation and a gradation. Now let us continue with the next, that is weathering. Now I have already told you, weathering means natural breaking down of rocks. Now this weathering, it has been further classified into three types. The first one, physical weathering, second one, chemical weathering, and third one is the biological weathering. Now in the physical weathering, it has been further subdivided. The first one is insolation. Now insolation means the temperature. Now especially due to insolation, the block disintegration takes place. Now how does the block disintegration takes place is that this physical weathering takes place especially in those areas where the temperature is very high during the daytime and the temperature falls below the freezing point during the night time. So it means that this block disintegration takes place especially in the desert areas. Now what happens is that during the daytime, when the temperature increases more than 40 degrees centigrade, the rocks also it starts to expand, because there are different types of minerals which expand due to increase of temperature. So during the daytime, when the rock expands, and during the night time when the temperature drops below the freezing time, it gets very less time for rock to go back to its original shape, resulting in less contraction. So due to continuous expansion and contraction, it results in the formation of cracks on the big rocks, resulting those cracks on the rock surface to break itself in the formation of block disintegration. And when this block is further disintegrated, or converted into smaller pieces of stones due to sudden increase of temperature and sudden decrease of temperature, those blocks are further disintegrated into smaller rocks, and those smaller rocks is called as granular disintegration. Next is frost. Now this frost takes place especially in those cold areas, especially in the humid cold areas. It means that during the daytime they get sufficient rainfall, and during the daytime the temperature drops below the freezing point. Now this frost is it also plays a very important role in physical weathering. Now during the daytime, whenever the rainfall takes place, the rainwater, it enters the cracks of the rocks. And during the night time, when the temperature drops below the freezing point, this water which has already entered the cracks of the rock, it converts itself into ice. And when it converts into ice, the volume of ice is much more bigger than the volume of water. As the volume of ice becomes much more bigger, it gives pressure to the cracks, resulting in further widening of the cracks. And the next day, when again the ice melts, the water moves much more deeper, as already the cracks has been widened due to the formation of ice. As it goes much more deeper, again the same night it converts itself into ice. Due to continuous process of melting of ice into water and conversion of water into ice, it results the rocks to break, and that is called as a frost action in physical weathering. Next is pressure release. Now, especially the igneous rock and the metamorphic rock are especially found at the deeper portion of the earth surface. And above those rocks, there are many sediments, different types of sedimentary rocks are found. When the sedimentary rocks or the sediments is being eroded by the agent of weathering, like the winds, water, or the movement of glacier, when it has been completely removed, and when it gets exposed to the nature, the release of the pressure by the sediment which was lying above it, results the disintegration of the metamorphic or the igneous rock, that is called as a pressure release. Next, Chemical weathering. Now this chemical weathering is active especially in those areas where it is hot, where it has hot and humid climate, and this hot and humid climate is especially found in the tropical zones, or you can say from between from equator towards 23.5 degree north and 23.5 degree south. The first is oxidation. Now oxidation takes place when the oxygen in air and the water, when the oxygen in the air and when the rainwater mixes itself. Clear? When this water and the oxygen mix itself, and the effect which takes place on the rocks is called as a oxidation. Now this oxidation especially takes place on those rocks which has higher percentage of iron compounds. Whenever these rocks having higher content of iron compounds has an effect of rainwater, it results the breaking of rocks, as well as these rocks it starts to decay. It starts to decay, resulting in the formation or resulting in the change of color. For example, the rust, because rust takes place because the iron compound it reacts with the oxygen and the water. As these two they react with the iron compound, it results in the formation of rust. So the same thing out here, when the rock has got more iron compounds, and when these iron compounds react with the oxygen and the water, when it reacts with the oxygen and the water, it starts to decay and results in the change of color, especially to brownish to reddish in color. And the color may vary. If it has got more amount of iron compounds, it becomes very red in color. If it has less iron compounds, sometimes it looks grey in color, sometimes it looks purple in color. Next is carbonation. Carbonation means mixing of carbon dioxide and water. When the carbon dioxide and water it mixes itself, it becomes acidic in nature, especially to limestones, because what happens, limestones dissolve in water. So as the limestone dissolves in water, it results in the formation of caves. It results in the formation of underground caves, especially found in Yugoslavia. And therefore, carbonation is a very important feature, or carbonation is one of the important chemical weathering which results in the change of landscape, or the change of the earth's change of the landscape, or the change of the relief feature, which has been done by the mixing or by dissolving limestone by the water. Next is hydration. Hydration means when the hydrogen and water they unite together. When the hydrogen and water they unite together, it results and when they unite together and when they have effect on the rocks has got different types of minerals, and those minerals they increase in size and volume. Because what happens, when they absorb hydrogen and water, the volume of the minerals increases as well as the size of the minerals increases. And when they absorb plenty of water, they become much more heavier. They become much more heavier, and finally this rock breaks due to increasing pressure. Because what happens, when they absorb huge amount of water plus hydrogen, the volume and the size increases. As the volume and the size increases, they have an internal pressure of increase in size due to higher absorption of water, resulting release of pressure. And when the pressure is released, it results in the breaking down of rocks, and that is called as a hydration. Next is solution. Solution takes place when different types of minerals which are soluble in water dissolves in the water. For example, salt. Salt is soluble in water. So whenever a river passes through through a rock which has got higher concentration of salt and that salt is soluble in water, it results those rocks to disintegrate itself because it is soluble in water, and that is called as a solution. Next, biological weathering, animal and insect. Now, these animals and insects, they play a very important role for the biological weathering, because animals, they dig burrows so that they can make the shelter for themselves, and when they make the shelter, it results in the higher weathering or the exposure of the rocks which is found at the deeper part of the earth. As they get exposed to the natural agent of erosion, those rocks are further disintegrated, resulting animal and insects are responsible. Next, vegetations. Now, vegetations means plants. Now, you may have seen that there are different types of plants, and you have seen different trees which is growing on a big piece of boulder. Now, that takes place because of the pollination. When the pollination process takes place, when the seed it starts to germinate, in search of water and in search of nutrient, the root it starts to dig much more deeper along the cracks of the rocks. As the plant increases in size, the roots of the plant also increases its size, resulting giving pressure on the cracks of those rocks, and finally those rocks breaks, resulting in weathering of rocks by vegetation. Next, humans, especially for the construction purposes, especially for the construction of infrastructure, there are big boulders, big rocks which has been broken down especially for their livelihood, and when the rocks are further disintegrated, it results in weathering by the human activities. Now listen boys, so far I have given you notes, there are some videos, clear, and in those notes and in these videos there are lots of differences given in the textbook chapter wise. Those differences you will learn at least 2 points each. Don't forget to go through those points, because even those differences are very, very important. And remember, whatever the notes I am giving you in the website, or whatever I am discussing in the videos, it is only based on the latest syllabus. Means there has been a changes in the syllabus because of the COVID-19. So you just follow what is been given in the website and what is been discussed in the classroom.